All right, we're back again.
Again.
We've done it again. So this week's gonna be a little different. All right, we're back again. Uh-oh.
That's me.
You hear that loop? Because I didn't mute my side. Anyway, today's gonna be a little different, folks. As you can see, just me and Josh, because we've had some technical difficulties. It was bound to happen, everybody. We do have Rob Vigeant JR on the show tonight, but for some reason we couldn't see his beautiful face. So he's trying to install Skype on a different computer or use a phone or something. Either way, we will hear his voice
at some point.
That lovely accent. That's going to make me miss the Northeast so bad.
I can still hear a loop.
Can you really? Did you open up the link in YouTube and not mute it?
I actually muted and then I unmuted it. So there you go.
There you
hey, there's 2 people watching, just you and me right now.
Hey, now there's 3 people watching. Fucking breaking
Rob
shit.
Vigeant will be here momentarily. He
Yes.
doesn't know how to use his daughter's tablet.
His big banana fingers.
Like most of us. Yeah, it sounded like he was hitting it with like a hammer or something.
Yeah.
I was like, take it easy. Don't use the barbell to press the buttons, man.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, Rob. We don't need your grip strength on this tablet.
So when he comes on, I was razzing him. I wasn't razzing him. He was razzing himself. Last night I shared the. He had already seen it, but I showed him the video of Trubin doing those 137-pound, whatever kind of curls you want to call them. Did you see that video?
Yeah, I saw that video.
So I mean, really, what he was doing was quite similar to table curls. I mean, getting it off the ground was impressive.
Yeah.
And then he like dug his elbow into his hip, and it just pulled out 5 or 6 reps, which is really impressive.
Yeah, unbelievably impressive.
And then, Rob went down to his basement and, of course, tried it immediately.
Yeah.
Because he's resting for WAL regionals. So
Well, that is resting.
Yeah. Going from 0 to 137 pounds in 30 seconds, however long it took him to get to the basement after watching the video.
Not a big deal. I'm a freak. Small natra.
Yeah.
I love Rob.
Exactly. An all natural freak. Good point.
I can't wait to talk to him again. I miss that guy.
Yeah.
I miss the Northeast, man. I do. There's
pieces we miss of it, you too,
There's
man.
pieces of it I miss. For sure. I love being here and I love what I'm doing. And it was the right move, but there's parts of it I miss. Like I told Tim, I talked to Bresnan a few days ago and I said, you know what, one thing I miss the most about you guys? He goes, what? I said, everybody's just so nice to me here. I just miss people being mean to me.
That's definitely not how people do things in the Northeast. We prefer to make fun of the people we like.
Over and over and over again until they go, you guys hate me, right? Everybody hates me, right? And we're like, no, dude. What makes you think that? Because we said we hate you?
Yeah.
Don't be ridiculous. So you're resting up for the Nationals coming up here.
Yeah, one of the 75 different national tournaments we have. Yes, I'm going to Atlantic City tomorrow. I mean, next week I'm going to compete. Thinking about just doing the Masters because I would like to try to get a little ticket to Bulgaria. One of these days, we're going to straighten out this 3 national situation. So we get all of them on the line and like forcibly mediate them into a single nationals. That should be no problem, right?
Shouldn't be.
Yeah,
but
piece of cake.
Will be. As long as we stop stepping on each other's toes. I mean, I hate that. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah, there's the North Carolina and South Carolina one that are a month apart, which I guess isn't that bad, but it's clustered in the same part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah. I do like that South Carolina. That South Carolina one has that room has a special place in my heart. That was my first nationals.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that.
It was my first nationals, and it was my first nationals that I won.
Very nice.
I went back 6 years later and won left-handed and 165.
Mm-hmm.
My first year I was ever in 2009, I went down there and pulled the novice class, and I won left-handed.
Yeah.
I won left-handed, took second right-handed in the 176 novice.
Oh, here comes Rob.
Oh no. Josh, you there? Oh, folks, this is going horribly. It was bound to go wrong, guys. I'm going to let you guys in here, and I'm going to tell Josh, you put me on hold. could you, Josh? Should be more embarrassed about this, but I'm not really embarrassed at all. What do you expect from 3 arm wrestlers that are trying to do tech stuff? Wasn't bound to go right. It's amazing that's gone this well so far, really. Josh is typing. He's typing more. I see Josh again.
Yes. Well, I got Rob on this other video over here. I'm trying to figure out how to get you in there.
Well. Want me to just call Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, do that, please.
Okay.
I just had a little monologue.
I'm sure it was fascinating.
It says 3 arm wrestlers that are trying to do tech stuff. When was it? How was it supposed to even go right? Anyways, I'm like, it's bound to happen.
All right. So, are you calling him or what?
I am. I'm calling him right now. Oh, Rob. Oh, Rob.
Call him right back.
And yes, it says Heather. It's not Heather, people. Yeah, I know no answer. Remove. Oh, the people, they're getting a good they're seeing what it's all about now. It's not all glitz, guys. This is the behind the scenes, in front of the scenes stuff.
We can edit this out of the podcast.
No, it's live. Robbie.
All right, so I'm getting the same thing I got on the other thing, and this is on my phone.
That's all right. It's fine. You sound great.
Yes.
All right, cool.
That's all that matters. So what's going on, dude?
Not much, man. Sitting here getting frustrated by technology.
Well, who doesn't really, you know?
Yeah, life's a bitch. I wish we could go back to rotary phones.
Just tin cans with a string. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that was my next one. I
Yeah.
like that.
So, Rob, you're getting ready for WAL?
Yeah. Well, I'm in what you call rest cycle now, but
Yeah.
that's the hardest part of the training for me.
Yeah, isn't that the worst?
It's a weird science to think that resting is growing, but you know, I like the work cycle. So yeah, I'm just chilling these past couple of weeks.
Yeah. So how's your weight? I mean, you're pulling the 195, I would imagine.
Yeah. I had a brief stint where I wanted to go to 225, but I feel like 195 is very unfinished for me. So I mean, my weight's great. I'm hovering about 200 pounds even. Morning, you know, maybe a little bit under. So between the day, like 198 to 203.
That's awesome. It's good to hear that you don't like, especially with. I know when I'm not going to be pulling the WAL this year, but when I heard that they changed it from a 48-hour weigh-in to a 24-hour weigh-in, I was happy back when I heard that because of the giant weight cuts that do happen. And I was thinking of guys like myself and like you who were 5 pounds above at any given time. And, you know, that 24-hour weigh-in is just so perfect for us.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, really how it should be, I mean, and this isn't because I'm close to the weight. I'd feel the same if it was a 200, and if it was 10 pounds over me or 10 pounds under me, it wouldn't matter. I mean, I think they should make it like weigh in at 2 hours before the event and go.
Yeah, that's how they do like Olympic weightlifting.
Exactly. Like you weigh in and then step up to bat. It shouldn't be sit in a sauna, lose 35 pounds and then pull, and you're really a 240-pound guy. I mean,
Sure.
If you're 240, pull 240.
Yeah. Well, you've never been afraid of weight. I remember it might have been 2010 or 9. When I was brand new in the sport, I remember you going to one of the ARM TV events. And you pulled supers, and it was a big thing because everybody thought you were so crazy because you didn't care that you were pulling supers at 220.
Yeah, no, and I did pretty well out there that day. But I mean, people are built so differently that you know, there's a lot of examples in the sport that guys that weigh the same that couldn't have more contrasting builds. And if you got a build that dictates that, you know, you can go up. I mean, people get so focused on weight when you know there's so many more factors to it than just what the scale says. And I've never really been a stickler for the weight. I just think that the cut stuff is you know, pull what you weigh, and you know, if you can't handle hanging with the bigger boys, then slim your fat ass down.
Yeah, yeah, do it the right way.
Right.
I like the idea of the 24-hour cuts, and it would be even cooler if they did what they do in the Olympic wrestling, where they weigh you in the day of as well, and you can't gain back more than 2% of your body weight, which is, you know, they do it for a wrestler safety.
That's a lot of math for arm wrestlers, though.
See how this whole Skype thing went, Josh? We can't do 2%.
Well, you don't have to do anything. All you need is one guy with a calculator. You guys don't have to worry about crap. You just have to show up.
Good.
Well,
absolutely. I love that.
Now we're talking.
I think that's a fantastic idea, because I mean, if you're pulling 195, you should be 195. I mean, even in every class, there's those examples. I mean, you see guys that are coming from 190 that are pulling 165.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bad representation of the sport too. I mean, I know what happens in fighting and everything, but those guys are also getting endorsements and millions of dollars. I mean, when you say somebody's a 165-pound champ, I'm thinking of your guys that are like, you know, Ron Klemba, who makes easy 165, and those guys. I'm not thinking of you know, me if I decided to suck down weight for, you know, a month span and almost kill myself and make the 65 class.
Yeah.
I'm a 200-pound guy. I don't belong representing the 165-pound champion.
No, I agree.
That's a good point.
I think you know, the weight classes are there, and they're designed to be for people that are within 10 pounds of the weight, you know, not people that are within 20 or 30 pounds. And frankly, it is dangerous. There's plenty of people that have gone into various types of organ failure, or even had their gallbladder or spleen removed because they did too much weight cutting too often, especially as you get older. Once you're over 40, you really shouldn't cut more than 10 pounds anyway, which is something that I have to worry about, unlike you two young whippersnappers.
Oh, God.
But, you know, it's a serious issue, and people think it's a game, and it's very easy.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a story back on the board, the Northeast board, maybe a couple years back, and there was a Brazilian UFC fighter, or it wasn't UFC, but MMA fighter, and I think he tried to cut like 20 some odd pounds in the sauna, and his blood like gelled up, it thickened up, and like seized his heart up, and he died in the sauna.
Sure.
This kid was in, I'm assuming he's in good condition. I mean, he's a high-end fighter, and you know, in his 20s, and he died. So nobody's immune to it. And I'm not a fan of the cutting. I cut last year. I did it a way other than water cutting. I don't know if it was any better. But right now, my goal is to hover around 200, and then, you know, aspirate and piss out the majority of it overnight.
Yeah. I think that's a smart way to do it, and it's safer, and it's, you know, if everybody did that, you'd have a truer representation of the best in each class too. So, I mean, it's better with the 24-hour cut, so that's at least an improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things that seem like they're trying to improve. The 24-hour cut's definitely better than the 48. You know, there's a few things that they're working on, and it's showing signs of improvement in some areas for sure.
So, you saw Dimitri Trubin's video last night. We were chatting about that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, what do you think?
Very, very impressive stuff. I mean, the guy definitely got a lot of power. I mean, I love all those videos, and I love them and I hate them because they send me down into my basement in my underwear and bare feet at 10 o'clock at night with no warm-up, and I just go for a max pull to see where I can gauge it. Because anytime you get a guy like that putting an honest video where, you know, they're doing a weight and a movement that you can kind of gauge yourself off of. Sure. You know, for a guy like me, it piques my curiosity for sure. So, I mean, every video that's popped up, whether it was side plank off or push car or anybody, I've gone to my basement, you know, on a given moment, dropped my dinner fork, jumped out of bed, wherever I was, and went and tried to see where I was at.
Sure.
So,
what do you think about what do you think about how Trubin pulled Michael Todd?
I think it's textbook. I mean, I think that Dimitri Trubin gets a ton of love for it. He's probably, you know, definitely a top arm wrestler in the game, but he gets a lot of love for hitting an angle that I feel that 10 North American guys could hit and beat Michael Todd. I just don't think many people really execute the tricep and utilize it enough. I saw Nick Zena pull that same move on Michael Todd that was very big and strong at the Arnold's one year and beat him in, you know, every bit as easy as Trubin did.
Sure.
You can't beat a guy from that angle pulling all from the top. You got to come up and kind of throw your shoulder on it at some point.
Yeah, the top roll transition into a tricep press with hand control has really started to die in the sport, and it's kind of cool to see a few people bringing it back. Sam Harris brings that back every once in a while too.
Right, and you'll see those guys are very effective with, floppers. They're very effective with, when you can throw your shoulder in there, which is why a guy like Travis has yet to beat Jerry Carteret and will probably never beat Jerry Carteret. Whereas you take a guy like John Brzezinski, who might not have quite the top roll as Travis,
right?
But if he gets to that center line, he can throw his shoulder on top of it and put the press on it.
Yep.
You get hand control from a shoulder-to-shoulder situation. It's different. And, to the Trubin thing, it was impressive how he pulled Michael Todd, but I've had my own opinions about how Michael pulls, and I don't give him as much love for that win because I didn't have, Michael Todd being the best puller in the world like others did going into that match.
Sure. Yeah, I just think the like you said, the textbook. It was like the technique, the way Trubin pulled that day. He really kept his composure well. If he did what
everyone else did and sat there on their tricep trying to top roll through that and they get stumped 2 inches from the pad, he would have lost 6-0.
Yeah.
But the fact that he came up and not only did he beat him, but he broke his spirit. Once Michael Todd knew that was something coming out of the arsenal and he got pushed through the first time he got pushed through, that makes somebody pull scared. That takes a lot of wind out of their sails.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard when you had a really great move or a really effective move in any case for so long, and then somebody beats it.
Yeah. I mean, you tell yourself that if you stop the match, you can't lose the match.
Sure.
And when it happens enough, you begin to believe it. And well, he was a perfect person to kind of put things in perspective. I mean, Michael Todd's had a great winning streak, but Trubin was textbook and ready for it.
Yeah, and I was impressed that he continued to do it, for 6 rounds. I know he lost 1 round, at least. Yeah. I think it was 5-1. But the fact that he was able to continue to do it, because it's one thing to do it once, but with that move, man, the longer the rounds go on, it can get really tough. But he really.
Oh yeah, if you get stopped in it, it can tear you up. Like that's a move that you gotta it's got to be effective because it can tear up your elbow quick.
Yeah.
That's actually what fascinates me about the super matches in general, is because you really have to have diverse technique to adjust to people. Because if he beats you one way, you go back to the same move, he's going to continue to repeat it. Like I think about Oleg Zok and Devin Larratt in the first 2 matches. This was a few years back. Oleg gave him hell, and Devin figured it out. Oleg didn't change his move, and then Devin got to the point where he could just sit there and hold him and smile, which he frequently does in super matches, because he adjusted and found the hole in Oleg's technique and then just exploited it, and Oleg didn't readjust. And so in some other matches you'll see that it goes back and forth. So I think
and that's why the super match is such a pure form of arm wrestling, because things happen so fast and in a nanosecond that 1 match, 2 match isn't really a good indicator. And on your note, if you look at somebody like the Corey Miller-Edward Tietty match,
sure,
Eduardo, the first 3 matches, Eduardo looked a little bit uncomfortable, was taking more of a higher grip than he normally does. Maybe his confidence was a little shook. And they didn't look like they were in the same sport. They didn't look like they were in the same league. But on match number 3, Eduardo put enough of the brakes on that he says, all right, I got to grab this fucker a little low and throw my shoulder at him.
Right.
And he did. And then by 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, it looked like Corey wasn't in the same league as Eduardo.
Right.
So, when all was said and done, they walked away 3-3, but your perception from the first 3 matches to the final 3 matches was totally shifted.
Yeah.
And that's why it's great when people can make those adjustments and find their groove, which is why I think super match pulling, like I pull tournament pulling because that's really what's biggest and offered now. But I really dig the idea of, the professional format, the super match pulling, the adjustments, the versatility, and all the things that go with that.
Yeah. We put an article about it today, and a lot of the big guys said they prefer the tournament format, but most of them also thought if you take the top 4 from any serious tournament like the WAL coming up and put them into super matches, that would be a more truthful way to determine who is actually the best.
Who the fuck prefers a tournament? Who in the fuck prefers a tournament bracket that's at the top of this game? Who?
Okay, well, I'll tell you.
Know specific fucking names, because I'm going to tell you right now, they're full of shit. Who says that? The flashes in the pans? Somebody who has zero endurance? Go ahead, tell me.
Dave Chafee said that. Travis Vigeant said that.
Flash pan.
And then Herman Stevens and Engen and Corey both said that tournaments and super matches should be considered equally, but you have to have success in both of them to be taken seriously.
How can you figure that when the variables are impossible to make even?
Here's the rationale.
Every single one of those guys I have heard. I've never met Engen, so Engen, I'm sorry, don't give me a death threat. But every one of those fucking guys have had something to say along the line about how a tournament bracket has played. And it's fucking just. That's why tournament sucks. Because if Travis Vigeant pulls Jerry Carteret and then has to pull Dave Chafee next round, but Dave Chafee pulled fucking Okie from Muskogee, are they both walking in the same when they pull? No, they're not.
Right.
And if Travis Vigeant gets that fire start, one hit and gets that flash pin and Dave goes to B-side, Dave's got no chance of rectifying himself unless he comes up that big, huge-ass B-side and fighting all the way up. And then by the time he gets there, where's everybody at? Who's where? What are we going to have, like, who did the most P90X for the weekday? No, fuck that. It's definitely not the best indicator of who the best guy in the room is.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at
shoulders.
Yeah, if you look at other sports, boxing, MMA, other
boxing, if they did tournaments, you know, what the fuck? Only if somebody's like way ahead of the curve is it like their consistency.
Right, that's true.
But on the other hand, you got things like wrestling and judo, both Olympic sports that do use a tournament format. But the difference in their tournament format and ours is that they do one match a day. So they do the match, you get a 24-hour rest period, you come back and you do another match. So a tournament like that would probably look much more like.
And a lot of those are, they're harder on. They're more muscular. They're not as connective tissue damaging. Like judo, I can't speak for as much, but like wrestling, you start talking when you wake up the next day. I tell you, I've gone to some tournaments. At the end of the tournament, I feel fucking dynamite. Like I could pull 10 more hours.
Sure.
I wake up the next day feeling like I got into a pile up and I was driving on the fucking hood of the car. It's bullshit. Yeah. And not only that, but like your energy levels from like the emotions you're riding all day long are sapped. So you wake up the next day almost like zombified. I mean, I do because I'm a head case enough. So my emotions are running hot.
Yeah, you probably get like adrenaline sickness.
I wake up the next day like somebody done sucked the life force out of me.
Yeah.
But I don't think, these people who have like another guy who said he prefers tournament pulling, and he admitted to me why, which is basically why I'm saying it, was Alan Ford. He considers himself a better tournament puller because he depends on his big hit, his direction, that if somebody catches him, they're already so out of position. And by the time they figure out what they did wrong, they either lost the match, they're B-side, they're something. Whereas if somebody can kind of get a handle on him, maybe 1 or 2 rounds, and they start to figure like, okay, this is that, they can kind of really get to his number.
Yeah.
The stronger, more versatile, rounded guy wants to get that number. He'll find that way. He'll find that lane.
Yeah, give me 1 or 2 matches to figure something out.
Yeah, you got to dig your feet and get there. Like, does it make Eduardo Tiete less of a puller because he got flashed for 2 rounds? No, he had to get his balls under him, get his confidence. But boy, once he got it, he looked like the fucking man.
Yeah, I thought that if it went to a 7th match, we know who would have won.
If it went to a 757th match, it would have been Tiete. At that point in time, he was so comfortable and so dominating, it was over.
Do you think that was, I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but matches 4, 5, and 6 all started from a ref script, whereas 1, 2, and 3, they had a typical start.
Honestly, I think if you watch the first match, it looked like he tried to load the same direction Corey was going. It looked like he was almost kind of posty trying to go back, and Corey was just stronger in the top, stronger in that direction. He couldn't match that direction. He couldn't play fire with fire. I think Eduardo had to grab him around his wrist and suck him in. But each match he came a little bit lower, and then when he stopped him, he came low. The ref's grip could have had a part of it for sure, but I think him having the confidence to kind of stand and kind of like get at him a little bit. You know, it's easy to lose your confidence. You could have a great hook and you get shook and you start backing up when really you should be going forward.
Yeah, and you look at those two, the way they're built, and Corey's a pretty average built guy as far as height and weight. His arm's not super long, his hand's not super big, but when you compare it to Eduardo, his arm is much longer. So trying to play that post game with him is like really, especially with some of his. Corey's got a great hand too.
You're right. Corey's got great hand. He's got that great riser. Like that motion for Corey would be a problem for a lot of the guys in the 200-pound class and even some of the bigger guys up in the next weight class.
Yeah.
He's got a supreme. You look at how he trains. You look at some of the things he's done. He trains that motion. So if you're going to attack that same direction, you're going to have similar strengths or tools to combat that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that led to Eduardo's defeat in the beginning rounds, amongst other things. But, you know, like I said, it's those people who like that. You look at Eduardo once he got comfortable, and it could have, if it was a best of 11, it would have ended up, 3-8.
Yeah, and that guy,
once he found his legs, he was in.
And once he gets his wrist in his bone to bone, that guy is unbelievable.
The only guy that can hang with him at that weight class is probably like Zoloev if he dips down.
Yeah.
That's it.
So all of you guys watching, if you want to ask any questions of Rob, just use the chat feature on the right side of the page there. I see there's quite a few of you, so don't be shy. Chime in with your questions. So if you do, let's just assume that you win WAL this year, Rob. Do you think you will switch to a like a PAL or supermatch format in the future, or what?
I'd love to. I'd love to pull PAL in an organization like that. I mean, I've put it out there that I just want to really pull, and I want to pull where some of the variables can be taken out of it. I want to pull. I know that the straps have been a hot topic lately.
Yeah.
I like to pull where it's the purest form, and I think supermatch is a purer form than tournament pulling. So I'd like to go there. But right now, WAL is what's on the docket. Right. I'd like to. I don't rule anything out. I mean, I'm not a superstar with superstar money and superstar contracts, so I just want to pull. So, yeah, I'm looking onward. I mean, even if it wasn't a big league thing, if I do well at this year's WAL, maybe look at going to Zloty or something. That's on my bucket list.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I feel ready for that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel mentally and physically prepared. So this would be the year that I'm going to do it if I do it.
Who would you like to pull over there? I mean, would you pull Kadzi or Spartak, or would you try to give Rustam?
In Poland?
Yeah, and Rustam is back. I don't know if you noticed that.
I would imagine, yeah, I noticed that. I would imagine in that class, you'd see the guys like I saw Gasparini, Rustam. I don't know if Prudnik could be back. I don't know if what classes. I'm assuming right now the guy over there is either Spartak or Rustam, where Zoloev kind of dips away from both those classes because of Spartak. So I mean, it's one of the big players over there, and then the rest of the field, I don't know where they're at, but there's definitely big names over there.
Yeah, they're all dangerous, that's for sure.
Oh, of course, they're all totally different pullers than we get here. It's like a different sport almost.
Yeah.
And I don't sit there and tout it as being any better. I think directionally it can play to the favor for an American, or it can play against them depending on, if you go over there with only a top roll, I think you can get hurt. But if you go over there with a strong top roll and a mega hook that you're going to catch them in like a kind of a half hooked position,
right?
You might fare very well. It depends.
Why do you think that the WAL, when they expanded, involving some foreign countries, stuck to just the eastern side of Europe? I'm sorry, the western side of Europe, not involving countries where all these really badasses live? Well,
I think it's for the English-speaking community, to be honest with you. I don't think that we need, at this point where they're pushing the sport out there, I think it comes down to that, where they don't. The attention span of people is hard enough without throwing subtitles and translators in there. If they had one Ivan Drago, that'd be cool. But having like 15 Ivan Dragos, it's like, give me a fucking break.
Well, that's what I've actually heard, is that the reason they didn't do it is because they were assuming that they would end up winning most of the classes, and you'd have.
Dude, yeah. Do you watch any foreign TV? I watch a couple kung fu flicks that are foreign, and maybe once in a while you cruise like the Spanish Game Show Network, but it's not for the subtitles.
That's a good one. All right. Because, you don't think it's nervous about the talent level, and especially in the lower weight classes?
I don't think the talent level's much higher. I mean, I can't speak for, I'm not as well brushed up on like the lower things like 65.
Yeah.
But in the 200-pound class, I mean, I don't know. It's like anywhere. You have like, what, 2 or 3 like superstars, and then the rest are middle of the road.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Zloty, Chad Silvers went over there and whooped ass, and Mike Solaris whipped ass until Chad Silvers hit Rustam Babayev, one of the greatest that ever lived.
Right.
And Mike Solaris hit Taras Ivankin, who at that tournament almost beat Ron Bath and John Brzezinski.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they all whipped ass, but what? They're less because they lost to one of the best guys that ever came down the pipe?
No.
That's a good point.
They have 1 or 2 superstars just like we do, but because those superstars are always on the podium, they represent all of the rusher athlete. But how many guys do people, how many of those guys, if you talk their mid-range, could come over here and really like whip ass? Would they be filling in with they might be filling in the middle of the pack and just be regular dudes.
No, I think you're right about that. I think it's probably very similar.
They're a big country with a big population, and granted, when you've got millions of people that you're picking from, you're going to get a couple freakazoids that are standouts.
Sure.
But that's like here too. Like, oh, who can you name that's a freak that was great? Oh, you got Arson, you got Rustam, you got this one, you got that one, Krasny. But after you get past like 10 names in different weight classes, you start running out of names. So then it's just like here in America.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that one's better than the other. I mean, our top guys have gone over there and had success against their top guys.
Yeah, particularly in the heavier weight classes, we seem to do very well.
Yeah, I mean, our lighter weight classes, I don't know. Maybe they have more of a crop. Maybe, how many of them have met? I mean, I know we had a world champ come over here, multi-time WAF world champ. It's taken more than a few beatings on this soil.
Yeah, that's true.
Giannis probably lost more here in America than he has in his whole fucking arm wrestling career.
That's true. That's true.
All right, I got a question for you here, Rob, from Carl. He says, do you believe pec strength is really important to build for arm wrestling side pressure, or is chest strength never the weak link, so it doesn't really matter?
Yes, I believe it's important. But I think people always ask me about like what strength is important, and you got to use that direction, right? If you're like posting top roll, I don't think you need much pec strength. I mean, I think you need some to keep your shoulder stabilized.
Sure.
But I don't think it's as important for somebody if like you're like a dedicated like full hand top roller or a hooker.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think keeping your shoulder, I think if you had an infinitely strong forearm, an infinitely strong hand, arm, shoulder, the weak leg will go to like your separation will come from your chest. Yeah. So I think if you want to be complete, you have to have a strong chest. However, if you're benching like 500 pounds and pec decking like a stack with your buddy sitting on it, I don't think you got too much worry about your chest strength, and you're not losing from there. I mean, maybe how you use it, but yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, it seems like it almost seems like with chest strength and arm wrestling, it's more of a locking. Like once you get it tight, it's probably not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, like I can't bench much, but I can like lock in from that pec deck angle an awful lot of weight. Sure. I would think that it's way above what a lot of like hardcore bench presses and weightlifters could do. But it took time to develop, because I noticed ever since my arm wrestling career started, my arm was stronger than that movement. So when I would go sideways, I'd separate the pec, and my pec would get as sore as my arm would. And in arm wrestling, that seems weird to people, but I do think that a pec could be a weak link for somebody. I see a lot of people take off to drive sideways, and they open up at the pec, and they could cut themselves a lot of drive room if they tighten that up.
I think. So how often do you work your chest in general?
Maybe once every 2 weeks or month. I do a solid push-up routine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a routine in these past couple of years. I don't have a routine. It's kind of like what I feel on the day. And, I've been more leaning towards like calisthenics as far as like push-ups go. And, I work my chest because I'm conscious of it when I practice. Like I'll lock that angle and try to drive just from there to feel that pull. And I don't know if that's better than doing it in the gym or not, but I don't have My house doesn't have a bench, and I don't ever get to the gym, so I do push-ups.
Speaking of the bench press, Rob, so Scott Mendelson is definitely in the sport now, and he challenged Cyplenkov a few months ago. I don't know if you saw that. And this new vendetta has Cyplenkov on it with an unnamed opponent. And PAL just put a little video out of Scott Mendelson arm wrestling or talking about something today, which I didn't get a chance to check out. But it seems like they're insinuating that that's what the match is going to be. But to me, it seems like as incredibly strong as Scott is, I feel like
I think that's the most misguided. What a misguided matchup from the people who put this shit together. You know, the WAL at least consults Neil Pickup because of his knowledge of the sport on matches and things like that. You can't just go and say, oh, this guy's strong, he's a bench presser. They're gonna make an example out of the guy, and they're gonna ruin the guy, and it's gonna be a horrible match for the public. It's not. That's not my speculation. It's not close. It really isn't. I mean, the match with Travis wasn't real. It wasn't. I'm gonna put it out there. It wasn't fucking real. And then he didn't even win California States.
Yeah.
You can't win. You can't not win a state championship and then go think you're gonna win the world championship. You can't.
Right.
I mean, that happens to me all the time. It makes me fucking nuts. You see these guys that tout themselves. They go to a liquefied national championship. They win the national championship. Then they go to, Skeeter's barbecue arm wrestling tournament down the road, and they take third place. It's you can't call yourself a national champion unless you, to some degree at least, can win your state. You know, I think he's riding his coattails from what he did really good, and he made a name for himself. I mean, that's no different than if Randy Couture wanted to start arm wrestling. It's really not that related.
Yeah, well, he's good at promoting himself, which I've noticed. He's also good at trash talking, which is definitely a skill, and it makes me wonder whether
moderately good.
There's not a lot of arm wrestlers that are skilled at it.
He's no Rob Vigeant Jr.
He's no Rob Vigeant. He's no Travis Bajan, but he's working on it, right? But it's almost like, occasionally pride fighting before the UFC, they used to do like the freak fights or like the grudge matches that were really not reasonable fights. They'd put like Akebono, who weighed 700 pounds, against Hoist Gracie, who weighed 170. And because there's been a significant amount of talk back between them, I think that might be the motivation for doing it. But they haven't announced it yet. I'm hoping that but who else can they put against?
Well, you know what it is. It's Scott's a huge name in the world of strength because of his records, and he probably comes with a boatload of like a lot of motivation nowadays is how many YouTube hits can you get, how many eyeballs will be on it, and in the world of celebrity in our sport, he probably has. Unless I'm forgetting somebody, like the most notoriety on a worldwide level of anyone in the sport.
Sure.
Unless I'm forgetting, because the bench press is something that millions of meatballs out there try to do, and he's probably got millions and millions of people that follow him. So now that he's into arm wrestling, it will bring in that viewer. But I think they should have they should have given him the old school Don King boxing route and sent him a bunch of fish, that might even be good matches for him. But you're giving him a guy that up until he got his wrist crack at A1 or Zloty, people thought wasn't even beatable. Mm-hmm. You don't go from just getting in the sport, and that's not a knock on Scott. It's anybody. Like, you shouldn't even be allowed to have that shot, that number one spot. How does Dave Chafee feel? How do these other guys feel that want that shot? Dmitry Trubin wants that shot. How do they get that shot just because in another arena you pushed a lot of weight?
Yeah, and I've been asked quite a bit about Scott. What do you think? And it's like the guy could be one of the best. Who knows? He became the best bench presser of all time in some degree. So he obviously has the drive and the work ethic to be able to do something like that. But not now. You know what?
There's one thing that I got to say to that. Just like some people, like you say, Alan Fisher. Some people say about me, like, built for arm wrestling, right? Light lower body, big hand, long arm and stuff. That guy is built for the bench press. Mm-hmm. That guy is very broad. He's very short armed.
Sure.
Right? He's got the makes and the thickness. He's barrel chested. Now, whether that's from bench pressing or just genetically, that guy might have laid down on a bench the first time he ever grabbed a bar in his life and done over 300.
Sure.
He might just have that genetic gift where there are some guys that genetically could do, one-arm pull-ups and curl their body weight. You'd never, some guys could close a 3 gripper first time they grab. You never know, like, does that genetic carry over beyond the work ethic to arm wrestling? Like, I don't think his build for a world champ bench presser is like a world champ arm wrestler. And on that note, you see a guy like, we'll say Tim Lewis is like kind of like a world-class level bench presser in his own right. The guy will be 165 and still pushing 450.
Sure.
That's almost triple your body weight. That's world fucking class. However, when it comes to arm wrestling, far from the ideal make.
Sure. And I mean, we've seen this too, like where an amazing bench pressers coming into the sport. And
of course.
Sean Latimer.
But Sean Latimer does have an arm wrestler's build. He's a very long, tall guy. I mean, he doesn't look long because he's so big, but I mean, he's got a big hand, big, things, but he was lacking so much push, lacking in the hook for a lot of years.
Right.
But you see Scott, I bet you Scott can't be, he's got to be under 6 foot, and he just looks very stout.
Yeah.
Like squatty. And I just don't know that in the super heavyweight category, because he's definitely not getting any lower. I can't see him ever beating Matt Mask or Devin Larratt.
Well, did you happen to see the matches he had with Herman Stevens?
Who?
Scott Mendelson.
No, I did not.
When they had a slow,
the social media loop.
When they did a slow start, Scott did pretty good. I think he pulled him over, but from a ready go, Herman busted his hand open almost immediately and beat him pretty quickly.
There you go.
It's it's an example of the hand strength being very different for our sport than it is for bench pressing. Yeah. By the way, Rob, Adam Barup, just a little shout out. He said he can't agree with you more about what you're saying. He's listening in and wants to say hi. So.
All right, man. What's up, Adam? Hope it's panning out for you in Florida, whatever you're doing.
And talking about matches that happened recently, Rob, did you see Ron Bath and Matt Maskpole?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Ron Bath's like my favorite arm wrestler of all time.
Yeah.
I love that dude. He changed my whole world in arm wrestling, and ever since I started watching arm wrestling, he's always been my favorite guy, favorite puller. And to see him in that form, it's awesome. I mean, he's always looked good, but he looks exceptionally good the past year.
Yeah, he looked really good stopping Matt, because Matt's a hell of a puller, man.
Well, I mean, even Chris Chandler, not many people. The people who have beat Chris have usually exploited an outside move, a really hard one.
Right.
Chris's hook is proven to be really way up there, and he kind of stayed hook to hook for him.
Yep.
I mean, there was a little bit of flat-handedness from Chris, but I think that was because he was kind of dragging himself under.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, Ron just looked a notch stronger than everybody, and in that class, to be a notch stronger speaks volumes.
I think so too, and the hand strength it takes to stop Matt's hit like that, and
absolutely,
I was very impressed. And once it was strapped up, it was just that was certainly favoring Ron quite a bit.
He's serious.
It's almost comical.
Me and Devin talked about Ron when I went up to visit Devin in Canada, and he said that he's pulled Ron a ton in the past 10 years or through his career. And he believed that the Ron that was at this past WAL was among the strongest there's ever been. And he was, getting better. And he said that Ron was in a scary strong right now.
Yeah, he looked awesome. And honestly, too, I was at regionals last year for WAL watching Ron. And I really took note. His left's been looking very good lately, too.
Well, that was the big shocker, because at that point in time, everyone was saying that nobody could beat Dickie Spearoff in the hook.
Yeah,
that to beat Dickie would take somebody like Travis to kind of go out and around him, and his hook was that good. And there's no doubt his hook probably is that good.
Yeah,
it just so happened that Ron's hook somewhere along the line was that good too. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. But his left looked amazing. He just looks in great form. He looks really like a really good runner this year. He's super dangerous.
I remember in '88 when I first started, he was the man back then. And that match with him and Devin last year at WL was probably my favorite match of all the ones to watch. Just there's so much power there and there's so much technique, and you watch those little, micro adjustments that they make back and forth and all that power. It's just you can learn so much from those guys, man. I just want to watch it over and over again.
Classical tournament scenario, not to get off Ron Bath, but on that note, him and Marcio went to war right-handed.
Yeah.
And they had epically long shoulder-to-shoulder wars. Now, how are you going to tell me we're going to figure out who the best guy in the room is when it could have been the two best guys in the room could have been Ron and Marcio.
Right.
But then neither one of them took home a hammer because of how they met up in that bracket.
Yeah, they beat the hell out of each other.
That's my whole point.
Yep.
So anyways, yeah, Ron looked great. And I mean, Marcio was last year's winner of that class, and he was in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was in it.
For sure.
You have any predictions for this year, Rob? Other than your class, obviously.
I'm trying to think. There's a couple kids coming over from 65 that look real strong from England.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple kids that look real fast and strong from the 65. I don't know if Talbot's going back down left-handed. I always think that like Ron Klemba's a threat. I think that he's got the juice to beat even Paul Talbot left-handed. I think we could see some upsets. It's going to depend. You know, I hear in regionals and whatnot, they're going to – and what happens in regionals plays so much of a part of finals because you get seeded, you get buys and all that stuff. But they said regionals is going to be 100% randomized computer brackets. So that could totally fuck the pooch right there. That could be like – that could have everybody on one end of the bracket and one lone guy sliding in the top.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
225s, I hear there's no John this year. Not sure how true that is. I know Devin's feeling pretty great both hands, and his confidence is running high.
Yeah.
You know, Matt Mask looks great. It's going to be hard to look past Ron Bath after what just happened.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like Ron and Marcio left-handed. I think Devin's a shoo-in. I think any one of those guys are definitely capable.
What about right-handed in the super heavies? You see anybody beating Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are closer to Dave than meets the eye. I mean, I think if regionals doesn't take as many victims as it did last year, you might see some upsets. I mean, I think regionals is going to tell a big tale. You know, you'll get Jerry and Dave. You know, let's just say, for instance, the tournament bracket. We all saw the practice video. Let's say Jerry and Dave get in there and have a little 1 minute tug. Yeah. And then even Dave wins. But then next match, he's got to go pull Nick Zena.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, Nick Zena might tie him up, bleed him a little bit. And let's just say, for instance, the next round of the winners or the losers, let's say somewhere along the line, Travis finds himself in the loser's bracket with Dave Chafee after Dave pulled Jerry and Nick Zena, went to the loser's bracket. Now he's got to pull Travis.
Yeah.
That could be Flash City. You might see Dave go from being undefeated for a few years to not even placing.
Sure.
And that's just hypothetical.
And in my opinion,
but it's all very possible.
Yeah, and in my opinion, you just brought up a great name that doesn't get talked about enough. In my opinion, Nick Zena.
Absolutely.
That dude has been looking great.
And there are guys that once your hand, you might be better than them. Square it up, fresh for fresh, which is why super match pulling's better. But when you get a tournament and you pull another guy that's comparable of level, blows your hand up, blows your arm up, now the guys you're pulling that are lesser than you are giving you fucking hell. They're giving you nightmares. You're hanging on for dear life sometimes.
Right.
You know, I've seen it too many times. And I think in the heavyweights, there's the obvious like 2 or 3, but there's not as deep of a class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think it's as deep. Left hand, I mean, it's going to be hard to argue who wins that. Right. I mean, right hand, Dave's the favorite, but I don't think he's. I said a tournament, you know, goes the person that's really ahead of the curve, and I don't think anyone in that class is that ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be exciting then. I like it when it's a little close like that.
I mean, I think Dave is, you know, stronger than all those guys in some angles, but I think that there's enough different angles, you know, that could be had that he could be in for a day. He could be in for it.
Well, I think he was, I mean, he never came out and said this because he's not an excuse maker, but people were of the impression that he was injured last year at the finals and then later on at A1. And that was a partial explanation for why Pushkar went through him so easily. But again, to your point, as we know, in those tournaments, people tend to lay down for Pushkar and Siplenkov. So they get to the finals almost completely fresh, where everybody gives Dave as much hell as they can getting there. So it's not necessarily. So,
of course, which is again, that's whether that's normal in the tournament world. It's a tactic that is played.
Yeah,
right.
You know, it is a tactic, and you know, I think Dave's great. He's got the favor to win. And as far as injuries, I mean, there's very few people walking around without either a level of injury or a level of being undertrained. To find that fine line and just be like, wow, I feel fucking perfect is like the 1%er.
Yeah, you and I have talked
feel
about
like
that.
I didn't do enough or I did way too much.
Yeah, you and I talked about that once, Rob, where it's like, is there ever been a time in your career when we just weren't hurt a little bit somewhere?
Right. Exactly.
A little tweak, just enough.
But
just
you know what? It
enough.
all comes down to in the social media. It comes down to how likable you are. If you know you kind of politically correct and go with the flow and shit, and you lose to somebody, people will rationalize it for you and go, "Oh,
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
he hurt himself, and he did this and that," and all of a sudden that loss doesn't count for anything. But when you're a dick, and you lose, it's kind of like, well, I don't give a fuck if you blew up your arm. You went to the table, you decided to pull, so you lost. Get fucked. And that's kind of the way it is. So at the end of the day, it's the same quote unquote excuse, but it's just acceptable depending on who you are, I guess.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely true.
We got another question coming in for you, Mr. Vigeant.
Yeah.
This one, it's a little tricky question here. As a hooker against a top roller who loads as much back pressure as he can to avoid any gap between your fingers and his hand during setup, how do you react? And then at go, what do you do as a priority?
Don't load. Don't load at all.
Yeah.
I would say don't load because you giving them the load to create that space, to create that on your hand. I'd take it to a no load situation. If like I tell Justin, my brother-in-law Jason. I mean, if he gets in the hook as an amateur, he's a very strong guy. And first thing I told him, he was having problems with his wrist and hand a little bit. That exact scenario, I told him don't load. And then it comes down to you just you shoot in, and when you let somebody load on you, you're letting them max out your fingers and hand and everything before you even go. And it took me a while to learn that. And I would say, without ever meeting you, without ever seeing you pull, don't load. Make them no load. You watch a guy like Travis as a professional at kind of killing time and going to a ref grip when he doesn't like the grip. I would say negate all those things you talk about or you're allowing them to do.
Yeah, very true. I agree with that.
Right. So that's like a high level strategy. I mean, it's a lot of we've been talking the last couple of weeks about what the value is of technique at the highest level, and the general wisdom, especially on Facebook and the threads, is that strength matters, technique is bullcrap. But I think I'd actually totally disagree with that. I think at the very top levels, when power is in many cases close to equal, that little small micro adjustments of techniques can make all the difference. And I think you see it from some of the pros, or a lot of the pros, you being one of them, Rob. I always tell people you're like a technique department store. And I think that's one of the reasons you have so much success.
I think I have, I can pull them out when I need to. I think I'm one of the more versatile guys, but I'm like one of those people that can teach really well, but I don't necessarily apply really well. Like I've shit the bed more than a few times on doing what I should do, but sometimes that's the downfall of having. There's times I wish I just had like one direction that I just focused on for the rest of my life because I was weak everywhere else, and it was just easy to just like go. It's hard to be a poster, top roller, hand guy, hook guy, shoulder press guy, everything, because
now you're thinking
try to be master of everything. You can't. You become really good at a lot of things, but not master of anything. You know what I mean?
That's actually an extremely interesting point, because the traditional wisdom in like judo that we were talking about earlier, there's 100 throws, but if you know more than 2, you're never going to win anything. So it's basically you practice your main technique and you have one backup to go to when you need to, and you practice those 2, hundreds of thousands of times to the point that everybody knows you're going to top roll, but they can't stop it, like Travis Bajan left-handed, for example.
Right. Right, like you see Rustam, like when he pulled, he grabbed everybody the same, did everything the same. He looked like a rerun reel of himself for 10 years.
Yeah, very true.
But the thing is there are times when, like a guy like Rustam would hit a guy like, we'll say, Evgeny Prudnik, right?
Yep.
And he could have really, fared better if he had like a little more of a rotation and top game or a little more of a outside game. And we've seen it with European pullers who are so conditioned to just crush from an angle, like when Pushkar, highest level puller, he pulled Devin Larratt left-handed. He did the same thing over 6 rounds. He was so conditioned to that one explosive, ridiculous angle that when somebody actually laid it up, he had 0 calibration and answer for it. None. He just kept going to the same exact thing. He did it with Michael Todd. He did it with Devin Larratt. He did the same thing. And there's a beauty in it for training, but there's also a time bomb when people figure out what your lane is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and with Rustum too, even before Prudnik showed up, I remember many years before that, the only person that was stopping was like
Gashevsky, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And it was the same exact angle and everything. You know, it was just that almost pulling straight towards your shoulder.
Right.
Almost exact. Almost like if they were to go a little harder, they'd pin themselves.
Right.
You know, that kind of angle. And yeah, once it gets hung up, man, it's a tough. If you don't have anywhere else to go, you're in some trouble.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, technique is great. You got to have, some people got to accept that their builds don't dictate for techniques either. Like there are some guys that just, you know, will never be a poster, or genetically they're so behind the curve they'll never be a great hooker, but they got great, you know, other things to do other things. I mean, I guess it just comes down to the person. So technique is obviously, it does matter, but you know, the power to drive it, like anything, is where I stand on it.
My question about that, Rob, is well, first of all, Tim Breslin has checked in. He said he's with Kenny Smith right now, and Kenny Smith wants to arm wrestle you really badly, so he wanted me to tell you that.
All right.
So what was I going to say? Oh yeah, what about the genetic factor? I mean, I ask people about this, and I always feel like they get pissed off at me because they think I'm insinuating that they didn't work hard to get where they are, which I'm not. But I do feel like there is a genetic advantage. I mean, no matter how hard you train, you're not going to beat Usain Bolt in a 100-yard dash.
And that's a great example. It's 100%. There are people out there that train their whole life to do things that some fucking schmo comes off the block and can just do easy.
Yeah.
And it's horribly exploding to somebody's mind that they can train for 20 years at something and somebody else just has a knack or a gift or an ability to do it better than you. And there are people out there that are genetically built for a sport. And, you know, like we'll say, for instance, without touting my horn, when I got into grip strength, I went to a grip tournament back in the early 2000s out in Pennsylvania. And I hadn't been training for grip long. I just always had, you know, really genetically strong hands, whether it was from genetics or work or a combination of both.
Yep.
I was always very curious about it. And I walked out there and the inch dumbbell was kind of sitting in the driveway. And all these big, huge dudes were sitting around it. And it was like an arm wrestling tournament. There's a lot of people there and a bunch of dudes standing around it. And this thing's not cracking the driveway. And I kind of just walked up to it and I was curious about it. And I deadlifted it both hands, left and right. And people look at me like, who in the fuck are you? Like, who is this kid? And I was just like, I didn't think much of it. I just saw a big dumbbell that was like huge looking and I was curious about it. So I just picked it up. I didn't know, I wasn't as well versed on like the grip strength, what the inch dumbbell was at the time. And people were like, who are you? Where you train? Like, where you come from? And these dudes were like crossover powerlifters, been training to lift the inch, specifically the inch, for like years and years and years. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just saw it and I just grabbed it and picked it up. And like that for me was something that was genetically easy. And then these other guys with all their training and regimes, and I see them online, like, what was your thick bar routine? How'd you get there? I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Like, I don't know. It just happened. Yeah. And like, I would bet a guy like Usain Bolt woke up one day and said, hey, I want to fucking run. And he was probably like at the collegiate level without even a coach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just genetics isn't the only factor. You know, I saw a shirt at the Olympia that says, hard work beats genetics if genetics fails to work hard.
Yeah, sure.
However, if genetics decides to work hard, I'm fucking sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Look out.
It's the X factor.
Yep.
It is.
Yeah, when you get the combination of both, that's when you get these absolute elite people.
You get the freaks.
Yeah.
I got a question here from a gentleman we were just talking about, Herman Stevens. He says hello and is curious about what happened at WL Finals, specifically about your shoulder and your hook. He says that he was under the impression that no one under 200 pounds could beat you in the hook. He's curious about what happened there.
Well, that's a very dinky undertone from a very I kind of can sense the dink in that, but that wasn't, if you know about the angles of arm wrestling, that wasn't a committed hook match. So me going a top roll away from somebody and getting caught in a hook is different than shoulder to shoulder. And that was my bad for not going there. That was my bad for not having the confidence. There was a lot of my bads there. And, you know, regardless of whys, yeah, Todd won it. This year, I get to try to rectify that and go that direction. But getting caught underneath from a top rolled position because of, starts, reffing, whichever, is very different when you're outstretched on a bicep than if you're shoulder to shoulder. I mean, if you want to go back and look at an example, when I pulled Steve Green, same thing happened to me. I pulled Steve Green and backed away from my arm, and he caught on top of me and chopped me down in a hook. But then when I decided to go hook shoulder to shoulder with him, I blasted him.
Was that an Arm Wars?
What's that?
Was that an Arm Wars with Niels?
Yeah, it was at Arm Wars.
Yeah. So
what happened was I lost the match, but the dinky undertone of that is don't ask questions you know the answers to.
Well, you only razz the people you like. That's my opinion usually.
Wow.
If you're comfortable making fun of someone, you must be pretty comfortable with your relationship with them usually. But at least that's the strategy I work by. I only make fun of people I like.
I gotcha.
I'm really looking forward to WL this time. I feel like it wasn't just you, Rob. I mean, I feel like a lot of people feel like they made a couple mistakes that they could correct and that they intend on doing better. I know besides you, there's quite a few.
I think a lot of those guys, I mean, I think why John had the success he had is not just because of his ability, which is very high and great, and his genetics, which is also great. I think he is a pressure cooker and he makes fewer mistakes.
Yeah.
I think on looking at my game, I don't think it's a mystery that I'm a head case and I'll go in with kind of a game plan and I'll abandon ship and fuck the pooch 0.0 seconds before they fire us off.
Right.
So, there's room for improvement there for sure. And the guy who makes less mistakes when it's close and can play it cool, I see it all the time. Guys panic. Guys, I see it from watching people and, I'm suspect to it too. It happens to me. It happened to me out there. It happened to me when I pulled Todd left-handed. It just so happens I got my shit together enough to pull it out down the road. But right-handed, I think I was more prone to beating him. It just, ability-wise, I didn't do it. It just didn't happen.
Well, it's fascinating to watch, man. I mean, I don't think people give enough credit to the mental game. I mean, there's a lot of people fold up in that way. I mean, we both know people who are untouchable in practice, and then when they go into tournaments, something happens. They can't flick the same switch, or they get into their own head, and they never seem to do the amount of damage that we think they're going to. I mean, there's people like that over the world. I mean, we all have that struggle to a certain extent as well. And, I don't think people in general give that the focus that they do on the weight training and the table time. And I'm not sure if there's really a way to train for it other than just doing so many tournaments that you lose the nervousness. I think I remember you talking about that, John, maybe I think it was you a long time ago when you started doing so many tournaments that you stopped being nervous about it beforehand.
Was
that you?
Definitely part of it. For me, it was just finding out a way to be confident but not like everybody else was. Like for me, if I'm deathly afraid of what's going to happen, if I convince myself I'm going to be last place every tournament.
Right.
And then that brings
how much weight do you put in the tournament, in the match? How much weight do you put in it?
Yeah.
And I mean, this isn't just subject to arm wrestlers and small level people. I mean, there's a guy like Tony Robbins gets commissioned to deal with the highest level athletes and Olympians across the board because the mental game has been known to break even the most talented athletes. Yeah. People get into a funk and all of a sudden a guy like Tiger Woods is hitting 10 over par on a course he hits 20 under par regularly.
What a reversal.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, the mental game is strong in every facet of life, but in sports, it's, something that seems so rudimentary and routine, like running straight down a track. You think, how is that a mental game? But believe me, I mean, it's a huge part of the game, huge part.
Yeah, and I know like back in 2012, after a wrist injury, I was basically all I did was hook and practice right-handed, and I had a pretty good hook after that. And once it healed up, I had a pretty good top roll too. But for some reason in tournaments, I could never hook. I just never did it. And I remember I went to a tournament once and I pulled a bunch of classes like I always did back in those days with state tournaments. And I told myself every single match, I'm going to grab low and hook no matter what. I don't care who's across the table. And I did. And it didn't really fare that well because, I was in some heavier classes too. But after that day, I was never afraid to hook again.
Right. You got to kind of trial by fire it. And it's like It's like they used to say in boxing when you get like glove shy and ring rust. If you sit out too long, which is the other part that hurts with like the WAL, is you wait a whole year for this to come around. And then because WAL is so big, some of the other like local tournaments we tune up with have kind of faded off and changed their focus to more like a WL thing.
Sure.
But when you're talking like in a whole year goes by, you wait for that compressed like couple tournaments to come up, you get kind of like ring rust. You get, you know, and the better you get, I think you put a little more pressure on yourself. There's all these different facets that come to it. And it's easy to get like a little glove shy. I mean, for me, it is. I got to stay active, which is why I've been hitting some of the little tournaments and whatnot. Because if I just sit in my house and it's my first time out in a year, you know, I'll be a total weirdo.
Yeah, the fact is, if you just dig into comfort, that's probably not a great thing when it comes, you know, when it becomes time to be uncomfortable.
Exactly. You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think I mean, as a top roller for my entire career, especially in the early 80s and such, I feel like switching over almost entirely to hook has had a massive impact on my, you know, confidence, first of all, because I don't fear the hook anymore. There's still plenty of people that can smoke me in it, but I'm comfortable with it. I'm learning the angles. You helped me with that too, John, but I just feel like, you know, spending a lot of time in something that you hate changes it from a weakness into a skill. I mean, that's an obvious statement, but a lot of us avoid doing it, and it's detrimental. As you've said a number of times, Rob, just working in that hook and developing like that diesel internal power actually makes a full hand top roll a much more legitimate technique.
So much better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Your strength in something Evan Burgoyne and a few of those guys up there, you know, they profess that if a real, true, pure top roll, like full hand, is very, very similar in the muscles you use and the directions you use to a hook.
Yeah.
It's very similar. There's very little differences. But if you got a really strong hook, you can probably, you know, it crosses over to a top roll unless you're doing the old, you know, post-up finger climb. But, you know, they're very comparable. And everything's uncomfortable at first when you try it. You know, you think people go into gymnastics and they start doing, you know, back handsprings and rocking out the parallel bars. Everything's weird at first, but when you do it 10,000 times, you know, I don't know. There was some guy they were talking about on TV the other night that had a philosophy that if you do anything 10,000 times, you'll be a pro, like, or an expert. And basically, you know, that's true with arm wrestling. At least your body will have comfort and muscle memory and reaction and stuff if you do it enough.
Yeah, it was a pretty famous book. It came out about 10 years ago, that theory of the 10,000 times.
Right.
And later in the book, it goes to 100,000 times for mastery. But some people have actually spent some time researching that. And what it came back to is what we were speaking about earlier, is that there is a genetic component where some people are going to reach mastery level faster than that. And if they focus and do the 10,000 or 100,000 times, their level of skill is going to reach an epic amount, you know, world level. Whereas the average person doing the same thing, they'll become a master compared to, you know, the average person walking on the street, but they're not going to be at that upper level. Like a good example is someone like me. Like when I went onto that Spartan cruise ship and everybody's there with huge biceps and all CrossFit guys, none of them could challenge me in arm wrestling. But when I go to the main states up there and I get Adam Brupp and Seth Barnett and Richie Durant, those guys crush me. You know what I mean? So it's
right.
And it's not like they're necessarily spending more time training than me or training harder, but there's a differential. And the question is, you know,
with repetition, you know, like a lot of guys, I went my whole life arm wrestling right-handed. You know, I was so much more. I had so much more strength right-handed everywhere. My hand, my wrist, my arm than my left. And I used to sign up. I'd get so nervous at tournaments when I started that I signed up my left 100% just to get on stage, just to get losing in front of everybody. So like the initial kind of like shame and embarrassment was already taken out left-handed, and I could invest my energies in my right hand. And I just used to do that. I used to always sign up right and left, and I would hope they ran left first so I could take my ass whippings left-handed so I could be like calm and collected for right.
Right.
For you know, I treated it mentally as a throwaway, but I trained it the same as my right. And my first national championship came left.
Right. That's good.
Imagine that. It became actually like a hand that somewhere along the line I got up there and I could just grab, and it was the most awkward thing in the world starting. I didn't know how to stand at the table. My body was all out of line, but just from doing it and kind of like putting that little bit of effort in time, it would just kind of like, it found its own lane, and my left got as good as my right.
Yeah, it's the theory of, you know, you change from a guy who arm wrestles to an arm wrestler. You know,
Right.
it's what your body does now. It's not only what your body does, but it's what your mind, second nature follows, you know?
Right.
Interesting. Craig's on. We're going to be on Craig's show in a few minutes. He just wrote in here and said RVJ for president. So maybe you could add that to your potential future
I don't
missions.
think I get many votes. Maybe I'll see if Trump needs a running mate.
He could be vice. Yeah, he could probably be vice president, right?
Ron, does he even have one yet? I don't know.
No, he's probably going to try
I'm
to.
poor to be a Republican, but we don't.
He'll probably just get a photocopy of himself and run with him. Here's another question. Here's another question for you again from Herman Stevens. He wants to know your opinion on the WAL setup.
What, the hand grip?
Yes, the start. WAL start.
I think it's fantastic if there could be a level of consistency. I still think it gets played, but I think that's always going to be the human element.
Yeah.
I think it's good overall. If I was to pick apart and change any of the WAL rules, that wouldn't be it. I think it's pretty good. You know, until we find a better way to get around the bias or mistakes the refs can make that can be so detrimental. I mean, I think that people are doing their best, and I think it's a step up from jockeying for grip. I mean, I train with kind of a real straight wrist and a flat hand, so that kind of plays to me because I've never been a grip jockey, or at least not in the past, 7-8 years. I kind of flatten my hand and keep a straight wrist. But the guys that train a little fucked up, I mean, it's a real hard transition for them.
Yeah, that's true.
Me personally, I found, success in it. It was hard getting used to it first. Yes, last year was like an icy bath. Jumping into everything was new. The table was new. You had 2 inches more on the pads.
Oh, yeah.
You probably didn't get utilized much. You had, the ref scripts, the certain things that could have been more effective in favor of probably a lot of pullers. And, last year was trial by fire. This year, I went out and bought a table the same as the WAL table because of that fucking tournament. So I've been looking at the angles, but I like the grip. I like it. I mean,
do you like the mini super match format for the finals?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I wish they would, do like a best of 5 again, because I think the super match is a fantastic way to kind of pan it out. A guy misses the go, or there are things that can sometimes really skew an outcome, and I like the super match format. Yeah, no, I think it's great. I don't like the 2 brackets, the 2 separate brackets.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
It's funny. He just asked me what you thought of the split bracket. So there you go.
I don't like. I don't like it because it's impossible. If you just get dropped in the right bracket, you can guarantee yourself into a spot without even having to put, for instance, regardless of what would happen, we never got to see Jerry Cataract pull Xena.
Right.
And that's kind of not fair that just because, the only person Jerry lost to was Dave, but he takes third. And on that tournament, that's a huge money difference, third to second. You're talking $3,000 to $10,000. You're talking $7,000 difference, and they never even pulled for it. I mean, if tough. You're gonna make the split bracket, you got to make that 4-way almost a fucking round robin or something. It's got to be it's got to be played out right.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of it, and I think they're doing a lot of things right. I mean, we talked about on a different show that the lack of rigid rules is frustrating for most of us. I think that, I think their stuff is great for TV because it's quick, it's fast, there's not as many fouls as there are obviously in like a WAF tournament, and that all works well for them in TV, as well as the small number of weight classes. But, committing to the sport, I don't know if I really don't. I mean, the UFC has 100 weight classes now, and they get stars in all of them. Some of them are more popular than others, but there's definitely enough of an interest to maintain them all. So I hope they change that.
Yeah, I think that every match should be started in that simple strap thing that you've been talking about and we've been talking about, and just fire it. Just every match, ref's grip, simple strap, that one loop strap. Start every match there. Boom, 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 bang it out. Guys get up there. I mean, the people who are really uncomfortable at a table are the ones that are either trying to play the rules, compensate for a weakness, or train fucked up. They're used to triple cap and they're used to bending their wrist in training. So when they get made to straighten out their wrist, they feel like they're getting raped.
Helpless,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea of just starting in that simple strap because it's super quick to put on and see what happens,
Yeah, I mean, they're going to slip. I don't know why. I mean, I know why people slip, but I mean, if you're getting up there to arm wrestle, there should never be a slip. There really shouldn't be. I mean, slipping comes when it's somebody's like super non-committal, when they want to get away. I mean,
well, it does, sometimes you get two gooseneck top rollers that'll happen because they're holding on to each other's fingertips.
but then once you're tied together, it should be easy.
Right.
So there are examples. You're right. But if you slap the strap on, you just go. I mean, if we're talking about cutting down time for viewership, but there comes a point when if you keep whittling things down for viewership, you start kind of losing the truth of the sport too. You got to kind of let guys get into a spot. You can't be like, all right, guys, you got 1 second to set up. Let's fire it off. And then what are we going to do? Play down who can adjust the fastest or who's the best guy?
Right.
Well, James brought up last week when we were talking to him, if you look at the early days of the UFC, people used to boo when guys were on the ground grappling. And then over the course of a couple of years, people started to become more sophisticated in their understanding of the sport. Now they realize what's going on. They recognize the techniques. And sometimes we were also talking about, it's fun watching Tim Breslin and Jerry Carteret just try to start a match with all the back and forth and elbows coming off and the grip, and they very infrequently actually pin one another because they're always fouling out. But there's fun in that too. There's a lot of technique back and forth.
It's part of the game. It's part of the hype. It's part of the whole game. And really, it is the reality. You're not going to get two guys in there. They're just going to reach up and grab each other, and there's a lot riding on it for these guys. I mean, when you get up there in a match that's a huge match for you, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of tension, and it is part of the game. And I mean, yeah, people say, oh, setup time, viewer. I mean, I'll worry about that when dudes start losing $1 million contracts and endorsements.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody came to me with a fucking endorsement from Monster or something and said, hey, but you gotta have all your matches start in a second, man, I'll be up there just low gripping people and letting them fire. And it is what it is. It's just, that's the way it's got to be. But until then, I mean, the only thing we get out of this is a bite of glory.
Yeah.
And a little bit of status amongst ourselves. Yeah. So I mean, we all want to hang on to that shit as tight as we can because it's easy come, easy go.
Right. That's very true. Very true.
Fire away, man. I'm here. Wealth of knowledge. Herman Stevens is brewing another question. I can feel him.
You can feel it coming.
His last question was, when are you coming back to Facebook? Because he needs some drama in his life.
I don't know, man.
I think we all. It was a lot more fun when you were on Facebook. I have to admit, even though like every couple of days you'd be like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, I couldn't even get Skype working today. Maybe I'll get back on and see what I. Maybe I'll get back on and see what I've been missing. I mean,
well, I got one question for you, Rob. When did you start pulling exactly?
My first tournament was Bill Sink's tournament in 2004.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit to like 2006. So you're a couple of years in the sport. I assume you're going to trainings at that point.
Yeah.
Your opinion from 2006 to 2016, as far as like training goes, what do you think has changed the most in your thought process and training?
I think I've had so many steps of evolution. That's like doing a 10-year span from like 17 to 27, right?
Yeah, right.
Because from 17, then you hit 19. You thought 17 was a kid, but then when you're 21, you can go out to the clubs and party, and you thought the 19-year-old kid was a tool. By 25, you think the 21-year-old kid was a fucking bonehead too. By 27, you're already married, got 3 girls knocked up, and you're out of that game. You know what I mean? So it's really hard because my training is changed in a lot of ways in life. This goes back to not being a professional athlete. From when I started, I used to take my money I did from work and travel everywhere, and arm wrestling was like my free time. And now it's like I got 4 kids. And, I get into the gym is it's not as easy. I try to be a little smarter when I do train in terms of, I think I trained like a bodybuilder back then. I was doing the men's health, 3 sets of 10 and all that shit. Where now I'm kind of a little more focused on specific stuff and things that matter. After hurting my shoulder, joint health matters to me, training a little smarter. You know, I can't say a ton's changed, but I'm trying to be a little more aware of what matters, and you know, staying healthy for sure. I tell people keep your shoulders healthy because that plagued me the most. But you know, I had more time back then, but I'm trying to utilize my time smarter now.
Okay, well, like you just touched on, you know, keeping like joint health and stuff. What would be the biggest change in maybe your viewpoint on recovery?
Fuck if I know, man. I had myself talking about recovery, and then I was down here trying to do 140-pound Dimitri Trubin curls last night when
Fair
I'm
enough,
going to
Rob.
tournament in 2 weeks. I came down here stone cold right before I talked to Josh Grant because he's like, "Did you see that Dimitri Trubin video?" I went down in my basement in my fucking underwears after I was in the middle of watching like I don't know 60 Days in Jail or whatever the fuck that show is. And I saw the video,
you could say it.
and I ran downstairs and no warm up, no pull up, no 25 curls, no stretches, no palms backwards, nothing. I go down because I get curious, like I get hot blooded, and I go and load up like $1.25 on a bar and see if I can curl it like he did. Then I'm like, well, fuck, how much is it? I'm like, that's like 130. So I want to see. I'm curious if I can do that. But these are things I do just because I'm a weirdo, and I don't have like recovery for me is like the hardest part of my game. I don't have a recovery game. My recovery game is like grab a couple wines, chill your busy head out, and go sit in a hot tub if you can.
Yeah, that I think what you just brought to light in the sport of arm wrestling is that we are in desperate need of good coaches.
Yeah, like, and even then, I'd be like, this fucking guy doesn't know what I'm feeling. He's like, dude, take time off. Like, don't do anything. I'm like, I can't. It's
like you said, you're a head case, man.
I get weird. Like, yeah, I'm so conditioned to think that you get strong in the work cycle when all the scientists will tell you it's in the rest cycle.
Right.
So I definitely have not developed that. Another thing that I can grow in my game, maybe when I'm in my 40s and more mature, but at the 35-year-old me is wicked fucked up in that area.
Yeah, for me, that's absolutely the same. I hate the rest cycle. But the only thing that really, one thing that has made me kind of look forward to it a little more is I know, like, I give myself 10 days from the table when I go into my rest cycle. And I know at the end of that 10 days, all I'm going to want to do once I step up that table is arm wrestle. So I really look forward to like that. Just please, referee, please say go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
say it, dude.
Yeah, it's you could definitely trip yourself up. I mean, when I started training, I just had a very basic, and I think maybe my training back then was better because I think all my training back then was recovery as far as like weight room stuff. I would go train where I trained once a week, and then everything in between was like full range, you know, medium to medium heavy weights, like bodybuilder type stuff.
Right.
But people
Blood
say
flow.
bodybuilder stuff's no good, but I'm a believer in full range of motion.
Totally.
Because I mean, I don't think you can train only static in your muscle. That's how shit tears and pops and gets all fucked up.
Tendinitis and all that.
Yeah, I train full range. Full range. You know, your muscles are made to work in full range, and I mean, I'm starting to think that maybe, with the exception of doing a couple core like static moves, that full range is a way to go if you're training hard on a table.
I 100% agree.
It's like that's in opposition to the conventional wisdom in Europe and the way they train with constant static holes and bands.
Well, what the fuck do they know? Like they ever produced a champion?
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that, I got another question here from the illustrious Jamie Sheldon, who just checked in. He wants to know how you feel about. He also says to say hello. He wants to know how you feel about pulling Nicholas Nanestad and Frode Hageland, who are coming over with the Europeans this year to WAL. And if not one of those two guys, who do you think is your biggest threat right-handed this year in the WAL?
Obvious, and I'm not gonna not give the guy the credit. Todd's the guy that I'm looking at. Todd's the guy that I've obsessed over for the past year.
Yeah.
For sure. Anyone that's been within my scope of things knows that I've obsessed about him for the past year. Nanestad looks dangerous, but I don't think his arm's up to par. And I can't see Frode Hageland giving me his hand and not getting cranked. So I think those guys are great pullers. They're dangerous in the class. I don't think they're going to be on that level. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But really, I feel that the person that's talking to you guys that's going to show up at that tournament is going to run through that field. I mean, I feel if I take the angles I need to with everybody, I just don't think that they're going to be up to snuff. That's just how I feel. I mean, when
how do you think those guys are gonna do in the overalls? I mean,
I think they're going to do fantastic. I mean, I think a guy like Nanestad's great for that class because when you add that bracket, I mean, he goes and pulls a guy like Todd. He might not have near the arm. He might not have what it takes to ever beat a guy like Todd horsepower-wise, but he could go soften up that hand and wrist for the field. He could just give it just enough to soften it that if he pulls a guy like, somebody else that's got, in the wings, next thing you know, he's in big trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's another guy in the mix that's very capable to fuck up the class, but I don't think he's got a chance to win it. Like, those guys are great for really fucking up a class, but I don't think either one of them can win it or place them. A guy like Frody with his endurance and stuff might be able to slide into a top 3.
Yeah,
but I'd be hard to see him in that class pull with a flop wrist and bump to a guy like Craig Tullier or Tullier or Chad Silvers or me or whoever else is there pulling flopped all day and thinking you're gonna just push through people. That's cool with like one guy after he's like shot his load, not with a room full of ass kickers.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that too.
Yeah, I mean, they're good, and they're definitely you might see a guy like Frody burn through a top guy and make a big scream. I just don't think that with the level of hands and wrists and the level that will be there, I don't think they'll be able to pull out a top 3 spot.
Okay. Most people don't know that you're not really a junior, Rob.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm a third.
Yeah.
I actually got stuck with junior because my cousin used to arm wrestle and he had the exact same name as me.
Yeah.
But he was older. So I just told people when they call the brackets, like, well, there's a guy here at 76 with this name. There's a guy here at 98. His name is the same guy. Like, who is this? And I said, just call me Junior. So ever since then, I got stuck with Rob Vigeant Jr. But really, Rob Vigeant Jr. is my father. There's a bunch of Rob Vigeants in my family. Like, my fucking family, when they were stuck at the delivery room, couldn't figure out what to name their kids. So they said, we'll just name him Robert. So there's a bunch of us, but
I remember
the two that arm wrestle. I'm really the third, but RBJ's kind of stuck, so I'll deal with it.
Yeah, your cousin used to whip my ass when I was new.
Yeah, he was actually pretty good for. He could have been better. I mean, he was a guy who was like a 65er that could have been good.
Correct. I agree with that. Yeah,
but you get older and you get heavier, and now he's a 200-pounder and you can't compete at that weight.
Yeah, his build is not made for 200 pound.
No, lot of power at that lower weight class.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, I think we have to cut it short because in about 20 minutes we got to jump on with Craig Soubier. So, but it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
Absolutely, man. It was fun.
Yeah,
you guys, all this shit gets my juices running for what's coming up.
Yeah, I told.
Now I'm gonna have to hop on Facebook and start talking all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah, I told Josh. I said Rob's accent is gonna make me miss the Northeast.
Yeah, I know. Where the fuck are you? Oh, you moved, huh?
I'm in Minneapolis now, dude.
Oh, what the fuck? What are you doing out there?
Why do you think I haven't been training with you?
Who are you training with? Handeland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole group.
Yeah, well, they got a big group out there, right?
Yeah, and luckily their schedules don't always match up, so I can pull like 3 or 4 times a week.
Oh, that's good. You got a good group out there.
Yeah.
John's got them all completed.
Are you going out to WAL this year?
No, I'm not.
You PAL in it?
Maybe.
You fucking guys, all jumping over. You're pissing me off.
Oh, come on, dude.
Ask Herman Stevens what he thinks about the PAL.
We'll get him on the show. He can answer that question, okay, Rob?
He could just type back. No, I mean, I'm intrigued about the PAL. I like the format, but so all you fucking dungeon freaks are going over there. All right. Well, I'll be the only New Englander. Me and Jerry will be over there. You're parking cars in Harvard Yard, people to death in Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't know what we're saying anyways.
What the fuck, dude?
Yeah. What the fuck? All right, guys. I appreciate it. It was fun.
All right, man.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks, Rob.
We'll catch up. Take care.
Bro. Adios.
All right, guys. That's all.
That's all, folks.
End the broadcast.